It was an incredible time of revelation and turmoil in the United States. From the late 1950s to the 1960s, America was facing an uncertain future. Tensions were high. The country was at war in Vietnam. By 1960, a young new president entered the White House, delivering words of change and inspiration.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The U.S. crossed another milestone when a brave astronaut achieved the impossible by orbiting the Earth.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
While fighting a war abroad, the country was being torn apart by a war of race relations at home. The civil rights movement was awakening the nation.
White girls and sisters and brothers, I have a dream today.
But while King was rising from the South, another man was rising from the North, from the streets and mosques of Harlem.
The most active person in the spreading of the black Muslim movement is Elijah Muhammad's second in command, who calls himself Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, a.k.a. Malcolm Little, was young, dynamic, and angry. His early years had been spent as a street hustler. Undisciplined and mostly in trouble, he spent time in prison, where he eventually picked up the Quran, cleaned himself up, and humbled himself to the teachings of Muslim leader Elijah Muhammad.
The white people in this country are guilty today and must accept the blame for the collective criminal act that was committed against black people by bringing our people to this country.
Malcolm X would quickly become the messenger of the Muslims.
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
When he spoke, people listened. They gathered at town halls, mosques, and even street corners.
Please, your women can't walk the street without some cracker putting his hands on her, and you're not supposed to be in motion.
The fiery rhetoric of Malcolm X struck a chord with blacks inside the Muslim faith and to those outside as well, because while Martin King was leading a peaceful movement preaching nonviolence, Malcolm X was proclaiming equality by any means necessary.
Democracy is hypocrisy. If democracy means freedom, why aren't our people free? If democracy means justice, why don't we have justice? If democracy means equality, why don't we have equality?
Malcolm X was not only critical of U.S. democracy, but also critical of the politicians elected to uphold it, especially President John F. Kennedy.
He has the time to take a stand against U.S. Steel, against Castro, against Khrushchev, against Laos and South Vietnam and all these other places all over the world. But when it comes to time to correcting the injustices that are being inflicted against Negroes in this country, Kennedy sits up there like Nero. He's fiddling while Birmingham is burning.
Not long after those remarks, President Kennedy was assassinated. And when asked about the murder, Malcolm X made a statement that many believe was the beginning of his own demise. He said it was like the chickens coming home to roost, which prompted an immediate reprimand from the Nation of Islam.
This statement is from Messenger Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Muslims in America. Minister Malcolm Shabazz addressing a public meeting at Manhattan Center in New York City on Sunday, December the 1st, did not speak for the Muslims when he made comments on the death of the President, John F. Kennedy. He was speaking for himself and not Muslims in general. And Minister Malcolm has been suspended from public speaking for the time being.
I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted. They were distorted. And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
You did not say that you were glad the President was killed.
No, that's what the press said. What would I look like saying that I'm glad the President was killed?
The relationship between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam became dramatically strained. Malcolm was silenced. He had become too big, too fast, and so popular that his image overshadowed that of Elijah Muhammad himself. The internal jealousy would become the beginning of the end of his time in the Nation of Islam.
During the 90 days that I've been silent, I have come to the conclusion that I can best help spread the solution and the diagnosis that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives of the so-called Negro problem in this country by by continuing to remain out of the Nation of Islam and working on my own without restriction.
Malcolm split from the Nation of Islam and took many Muslim followers with him. But it wouldn't be quite that simple. He began to be disrespectful to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and to the man himself. There were consequences for this. Threats began to surface.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that I'm out of the black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretaries.
Too defiant to yield, Malcolm had a target on his back. The internal, strictly disciplined Muslim security force called the Fruit of Islam were looking to inflict justice. With his days numbered, Malcolm was understandably agitated.
I wanted you to know that my house was bombed. It was bombed by the black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad. Now they had they had planned to do it from the front and the back so that I couldn't get out. They covered the front completely, the front door. Then they had come to the back, but instead of getting directly in the back of the house and throwing it this way, they stood at a 45-degree angle and tossed it at the window so it glanced and went onto the ground.
And I don't know if I woke my husband up or he woke me up, but I remember him pushing me out of the bedroom door, and I looked to my right, and I saw all of the fire.
The fire hit the window, and it woke up my second oldest baby. But the fire burned on the outside of the house. But had that one gone through that window, it would have fallen on a 6-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old girl. And I'm going to tell you, if it had done it, I'd taken my rifle and gone after anybody in sight.
Are you not perhaps afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh yes, I probably am a dead man already.
Abdullah Abdur Razak, then known as James 67X, was a former member of the Fruit of Islam who stayed with Malcolm when he left the nation. And he says the atmosphere was extremely tense and extremely dangerous.
There was a brother named Reuben Francis who was given this assignment, paid $65 a week to guard Brother Malcolm's life, because we knew now the noose was drawing tighter. Brother Malcolm stayed at a hotel. The only person who knew what hotel he was at were either the security forces and Brother Reuben. I didn't even know, and I was his man Friday. His house having been firebombed, he was no longer living in the house. We moved him out, and he moved into Ruby D's brother, Thomas 13X Wallace. He moved his family into that home, and Malcolm apparently stayed at hotels after that.
Khalil Islam, then known as Thomas 15X Johnson, was also a former member of the Fruit of Islam. Were you ever instructed by anyone in the nation that Malcolm's got to go? If you have a chance, make it happen?
Oh, yeah.
They did tell you that?
Sure, that was common knowledge.
How was that to happen? Was there ever any instruction on how he would be taken out?
No instruction, but it was stated that, he's got to go. He slandered on Elijah Muhammad. That's like slandering God.
Normally, when Malcolm would go and speak, wouldn't there be police officers around that were always following him and observing what he was doing?
There were police officers always following him, but they were plainclothes policemen. They were not in uniform.
But you all knew who they were. You certainly could identify them.
No, they changed all the time. They had some police sometime and some police in another time. He'd go to one precinct and one car would drop off and another one would pick him up. This is kind of ridiculous. The police wanted Malcolm dead. So why would they want to protect him? I mean, people have this naive assumption that the police wanted Malcolm alive. The police wanted Malcolm dead. Do you understand that? When Malcolm said that according to the Constitution of the United States, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The police chief said, we're not going to have people walking around New York with weapons, but they were, and constitutionally nothing could be done about it. So the police broke into Malcolm's house and shot up the place when he was in St. Albans.
And you know that for a fact?
Of course I know it for a fact. It's in the newspapers. It's in the FBI reports. It's in the Bureau of Special Services report. I didn't dream these things up.
Are you concerned about your own life right now?
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed
that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
With those thoughts still heavy on his mind, Malcolm headed to the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem on February 21st, 1965, to speak to the hundreds of waiting followers. But little did they know what was about to happen.
I am stage left, behind the curtain. Brother Benjamin opened up, meaning that he introduced the speaker. He didn't immediately introduce the speaker because Brother Malcolm wasn't there. But he opened up, then Brother Malcolm came.
He raised his hand in a Muslim greeting, Salam Alaikum. At that point, I heard a rumbling behind me.
Someone said, "Nigga, take your hands out my pocket." And Malcolm now moved in that direction from the podium and said, "Cool it, brothers, cool it."
Malcolm had his hand up. He said, "Stay cool, stay calm." Just then the gunfire went off and his hand was up. I remember this. I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint.
And at that time, a short, dark guy with a goatee ran down with a shotgun, shot Brother Malcolm. A number of other people were behind him firing weapons.
You saw the life leave him, huh?
I saw the life leave him. I saw him go white, just like that. Like they say, the spirit leaves you. Whatever it is that animates a person, I saw that leave him.
By now, Malcolm was probably already gone, but authorities hastily rushed him outside and desperately tried to get him across the street to the hospital emergency room.
What condition was he in on arrival?
He was dead on arrival.
Across Harlem, life was also about to change for another man without him even knowing it. Thomas 15X Johnson says he was lying in bed recovering from a bout with rheumatoid arthritis when a neighbor came knocking at his door.
Turn on the TV. So when you turn on the TV, they just hit Big Red.
Big Red is what they called Malcolm
That's what he referred to him as Big Red, yeah. You know, and I turned on the TV and I'm watching them carry him across to, what's that, Presbyterian Hospital? Shoot, I'm watching this.
What he didn't know is that less than 2 weeks later, the police would be waiting for him outside his home.
I went outside. I said, "Listen, you want to see me?" And they said, "Yeah, we want to see you." I said, "For what?" I said, "We want to take you downtown to the station, police station." "For what?" I said, "Be a wise guy. For the assassination of Malcolm." I said, "What, are you joking? You got to be joking. This is a fairy tale or a dream or something, man. You know, I'm having a nightmare here."
He meant a great deal to me and my people. I'm sorry that a good man is gone.
Harlem was distraught, and the black community was mourning the loss of Malcolm X.
I saw Brother Malcolm as carrying my son's future in his pocket. The crap that I went through as a youngster, that my son would not have to go through because of Malcolm. Sitting in the back of the damn bus, peeing on some piece of concrete, going into people's drugstore and buying food and have your own woman tell you, "We don't serve colored here."
The assassination of Malcolm X was an unfortunate tragedy.
There was also word from Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad, who in a rare public appearance came forth to deny any involvement in Malcolm's murder.
Way I see it, Malcolm is the victim of his own preaching. He preached for us, and so he became the victim of it.
How many shots were there, Chief?
Apparently there were at least 8 or 10 shots fired, 7 of which hit Malcolm.
Were they all pistol shots, sir?
I'm not certain at this time whether they were all pistol shots. We did recover a sawed-off shotgun.
The blast from that shotgun was said to be the kill shot, a shot police say was delivered by Khalil Islam.
They say I was the shotgun man. The shotgun man was described by several people as a dark-skinned person with a beard about 5'6".
At the time, you didn't have a beard.
Didn't have no hair. We didn't wear hair then.
And you're certainly not dark-skinned.
I know, but that's what they said. And so I say it was all trumped up. Everybody was in cahoots. Listen, the lawyer was in cahoots with the DA. The DA was in cahoots with the judge. So what chance do I have?
Even though you say you were at home in the bed at the time.
I was home in the bed.
Did you even own a shotgun?
No. Never held one in my life.
If that statement is true, it didn't seem to make a difference to the authorities investigating the murder. Remember, Khalil Islam, known in 1965 as Thomas 15X Johnson, was a hardcore follower of Elijah Muhammad and a strict disciplinarian and enforcer in the Fruit of Islam. And ironically, Thomas and Malcolm both came to the Nation of Islam in very similar ways, through prison.
I was a very wayward, criminal, backward, illiterate, uneducated, and whatever other negative characteristics you can think of type of person until I heard the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
I was mixed up in the drugs and, you know, petty crime. I never did anything that on the major.
What kinds of crimes were you doing?
No, like I said, it would be possession of paraphernalia, drugs. That's why I say it was nothing real serious. You know, no robberies, no burglaries, no bank robberies and stuff like that. I wasn't involved in, you know.
What were your early impressions of the nation?
Well, I'll tell you this. I was just like the average prisoner, you know, smoking, drinking, and doing everything you could do, man, to escape reality, you know. And when I heard the teachings of Islam, that's when I came in total contact with my soul. It came in peace.
Once out of prison, Thomas 15X rapidly rose through the ranks, earning the respect of his brothers as a lieutenant at Mosque No. 7, which was led by Malcolm X. You were transformed from the inside out, as you admit, but you also say that you maintained your sense of discipline, and you became an enforcer. Is that right? Tell me about that.
Well, they say enforcer. I like to say lieutenant.
A lieutenant?
Yeah, enforcer, I don't know. It just seems to have that underworld.
But did you crack a few heads if you had to?
Oh, yeah, we did that. It was a very inflamed atmosphere. At that time, cracking heads was part of the program.
Part of being a lieutenant was also taking care of Malcolm X and his family.
My affiliation was, when he came into the mosque, I had to make sure he had a parking space, and I had to make sure that his family received enough food to last for a month. We had a supermarket in Brooklyn, Shabazz Supermarket. And
you would deliver food to him?
Yeah, me and other brothers, you know, to last for a month.
What was your opinion of Malcolm X?
We love everybody who loves us.
Well, he complained about me, and because I thought so much of him, due to respect, I didn't feel as though I was qualified to hold conversation with him. So he told Captain Joseph one day, he said, I don't like this brother here to be on security with me. He said, Thomas, I don't like. He said, why? He says, I like people around me that talk.
And you never talked?
No, you know, how you doing, how you feel, you know, you want something. But I never held a conversation with him, a lengthy conversation, because of the distance and caliber.
But you respected him.
Oh, yeah, I had a great deal. That's why I didn't open my mouth. I'm too afraid that I'm going to say the wrong thing.
That respect and admiration is what makes the next chapter in Islam's life so amazing. Because he had a reputation as a dedicated enforcer with the Fruit of Islam, he says that ultimately put a target on his back. The police picked him up for being the trigger man in the assassination. His Muslim leaders told him not to panic.
Don't put up a fight. Go on down. We know that they got you, you know, and don't worry about it.
And that was the end of you?
That was the end of me.
Did you ever think that sooner or later someone would come forward and say, look, you've got the wrong man?
Oh, of course.
You weren't the one?
I thought the whole nation would come forward. I thought the whole nation would come and say, what are you doing with this man? Why are you locking this man up?
But they never did?
No. Never did. And it didn't dawn on me until 12 years later that I had been set up for a scapegoat.
Were you the perfect scapegoat?
Perfect.
Abdur Razak began to ask his own questions about the assassination. He was there when it happened and says he never saw Khalil Islam in the ballroom, nor did anyone else.
Nobody of the hundreds of people in the Audubon ballroom, many of whom had been in the Nation of Islam, right? Nobody identified this brother as having been in the Audubon ballroom. Now that's impossible. There was supposed to be friction between those of us who were in the OAU in the Muslim Mosque and the Nation of Islam, right? That Malcolm had left. Several days later, it's announced that Thomas 15X Johnson, whom we know as Khalil Islam, was picked up for the execution of Malcolm X.
And you knew that he wasn't there because you saw the gunman.
I knew as sure as God made green apples that he was not there, but strange things can happen. So I went to everyone who was in the nation, who had been in the nation, and was now in the Muslim Mosque or the OAAU, and I said, did you see Thomas? No. Did you see Thomas? No. Now Reuben Francis, who was arrested for shooting Talmadge Hayer, must have seen the people who were running out of the Audubon ballroom, right? He never testified that Thomas was there. Benjamin 2X Goodman, the late Benjamin 2X Goodman, or Benjamin Kareem, was on the rostrum. He knew everyone that was in the nation. He could not identify Thomas as having been there. As a matter of fact, he said he wasn't there.
Not only that, but Khalil Islam has provided us with what he says is the sworn testimony of Benjamin Goodman. These papers confirm that Goodman was a member of the Fruit of Islam and had a close association with Norman 3X Butler, another convicted assassin, and Thomas 15X Johnson, Khalil Islam. In these papers, Goodman says that he was an assistant minister to Malcolm X, and that on that fateful day in the Audubon ballroom when Malcolm was assassinated, Goodman says he was the one who gave the introductory speech before Malcolm took the podium. He says he introduced Malcolm as a man who would give his life for the people. He says also it was while giving that speech that he scanned the room, and he says he never saw Butler or Johnson, whom he knew well, in the room. But Goodman admits that he had left the ballroom by the time Malcolm actually started speaking and by the time the shots rang out that killed him. Now, according to Goodman's affidavit, over the next several weeks, he was repeatedly questioned by the authorities, the NYPD, even the FBI, about Butler or Johnson's possible involvement in the murder of Malcolm X. And Goodman says he repeatedly and consistently told the authorities that they were not present. And when that wasn't good enough, he says, according to this sworn testimony, Goodman says the authorities tried to convince him to change his story and even threatened him with jail time. But he says he still wouldn't do it. Benjamin Goodman was never called to testify in the criminal trial of either Butler or Johnson. Later, another gentleman came forward and said that he was the one who knew about this, Talmadge Hayer.
Oh, that was much later in the trial.
He came much later, but he finally said that you weren't the one and that he was involved in some others. Is that right?
He said him and 4 others were involved. He gave the names, the addresses, they grew up together. He gave the address where they used to work. All the childhood activity, because they came from the same community. He gave all that up. I have that in my possession.
And what happened? After another person comes forward and confesses, what happened to you?
Well, the DA said that he heard too much of the trial, man. You know, now he wants to exonerate this guy. You know, if he did it in the beginning, it might have had a different effect. But the DA played it like that.
22 years behind bars for a crime he says he didn't commit. Today, Islam walks the streets of Harlem unnoticed, despite his infamous place in history. We took him and Abdur Razak back to the Audubon Ballroom, which is now a museum dedicated to the life of Malcolm X. It was a time of shared reflection in the shadows of a giant.
I was very, very disturbed about that slavery period. I read about it, you know, and when I made that transformation in Islam, I saw that as an answer, he served as a liberator for all the things, man, that I was thinking that was negative about the system. And then you see somebody stand up there and speak on the scale that Malcolm was speaking on, and you say, wow, this is the answer.
Yeah.
I feel I have somebody now to represent me, you know
to
what I mean?
articulate what you were thinking. Here's a man who stood up and said, so and so and so and so and so, right in the face, right into the eye of the storm.
It's that same kind of defiance that has Khalil Islam fighting here and now, some 43 years later, to restore his name.
I would like to be exonerated. You know how many, I read books where they have me in there with my picture and they have it like if this is the actual fact that this man is the one who did this, is the man that had the shotgun. They say that was the cause of Malcolm's death. That's what's thought. Of course, I want to be exonerated. I don't want people, but I had to learn how to live with that, you know.
Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
In the end, Khalil Islam tells his story to try and set himself free from the shroud of being a convicted killer.
What's the last thing you want people to know about you?
That I'm a righteous, innocent individual, a real human being. That's true. I am.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.